Sports nicknames are intended to convey courage, leadership, fortitude, and other positive qualities. They can also be controversial. On SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast, columnists Sam Mellinger and Vahe Gregorian talk sports nicknames, the Chiefs, and Native American imagery. In light of the conversations happening in Washington over the Redskins and in Cleveland about the Indians, we guess at what the Chiefs are asking themselves and wonder if it's time for change, and if it is, what kind of change might we see? It's Wednesday, July 8th. I'm Blair Kerkhoff. Let's get started with Sam and Vahe. Hello, Sam. Hey, Vahe.
What's up?
I kind of liked it. I got the better end of that intro. Just a litlittle sharp on Sam, it seemed like.
You have to be sharp with Sam.
This
is the only way I respond.
Well, it's good to see you guys. And we're going to talk about something today that I thought maybe we would get to earlier in the week, but then something happened on Monday,
right.
And Kansas City has a new $500 million athlete. So we've put this off for a couple of days, but it's a topic that's not going anywhere. In fact, it hasn't gone anywhere since, for a long time, really. We've written about it. I've written about it. I got a story up on my screen now from 1995 writing about this topic. And so, enough of the way of introduction, let me tell you what the topic is. And I'll do that by reading the headline on the op-ed page, the unsigned opinion in today's Kansas City Star. And what I want, after I read this headline, I want to get you guys to give me your one-word answer, and then I want us to talk about this. And then by the end of our conversation, we'll see if that answer changes. Okay? So the headline is, Redskins, Indians considering new names. Is it time for the Chiefs to make a change? I wanted a yes or no. Is it time for the Chiefs to make a change? I guess my answer, I'll go first, and my answer would be, I want the Chiefs to make a change. I just don't think it needs to be the name of the team. Sam, how about you?
That was not a one-word answer.
It wasn't. I violated my own rule there.
Thus giving us license.
Do I need one word or no? It's anarchy right now. Yes, I think it's time that it's past time that they make a change. But no, I don't think the name has to change.
And I'm with you guys, and the way I keep seeing it, we can explore part of this point as we go along. But I keep thinking this: that the complication is, can you retain the name, which I think is not inherently offensive, I think, but that's another point too, I think. I don't know. But I think, can you do that without, can you keep the name without staying entwined with the imagery that is offensive and appropriation that is offensive? Let's
go back to how we got here. And, the Chiefs arrive in 1963, and Hank Stram wanted to keep the name Texans
and Lamar and Lamar.
Yeah, both of them.
Yeah.
Thought, let's call them the Kansas City Texans. That would not have gone over well for a new team in Kansas City. So they had a name the team contest, and Chiefs, I don't know how high on the list the Chiefs were. There are many other suggestions, Monarchs being one of them, Royals,
Blues, maybe Royals.
Yeah. The Mocans, the Meat Packers, sort of stuff that can't. Actually, I think I read in Michael McCambridge's book that the Mules was the top vote getter.
Oh, is that right?
Yep.
Okay,
it's
not just others receiving votes. Right. It was a.
Yeah. I just keep thinking about what I've always considered as Kansas City's sort of insecurity, like the civic insecurity and self-esteem problem that sometimes we have. And if it was the Kansas City Texans or the Kansas City Mules, I mean, that would just really add into it.
That's right.
We needed Chiefs. We
pile
needed
on the shade.
Royals. We needed Kings. We needed
Monarchs were so good, right?
Yeah, exactly. Perfect.
So Chiefs they were, and I've read up on the topic and I've reported on it, and I just don't remember hearing or reading about any kind of pushback on the team name
at
the time, and especially with the team success it had under Hank Stram through the Super Bowl years and through the merger.
just one little quick twist to add in there, which it's sort of a point of interest. So there's the name the team contest, but also, of course, it's the whole Roe Bartle is the chief. And Jack Stedman, I believe Jack Stedman at that point, I don't know if the contest was rigged, but I think Jack Stedman made the point to Lamar, we've got to name, at least legend has it, we've got to name this after Roe Bartle.
Right, and he came to the nickname the Chief.
Right.
Honestly, he was he was some sort of
tribe of Miccosay.
Miccosay, right? The Miccosay tribe. He was some kind of leader, or like he wasn't Native American, but he was given, because of the work he did with this tribe, he was given this title. Given this title,
and also Sam and I were talking about this off the air, and maybe I talked with you about it a little bit too, but the one time I went to Jack Stedman's house, he had in plexiglass the headdress of Roe Bartle as one of his most prized possessions, which this also leads to the complication of the question. I mean, on one hand, we've certainly heard people saying, well, don't you understand, the Chiefs were named after Roe Bartle because his nickname was the Chief. Well, but yeah, his nickname was the Chief because of this. So it's not, Chief Justice or Chief of Police. I mean, it's
right. No, that's right. So the Chiefs have their success, right, under, with Lanier and Bell and Buchanan and Dawson and Stenerud and the whole gang. They fall into, a terrible period. And then, when Carl Peterson and Marty Schottenheimer come to Kansas City, the franchise is revived. And part of the revival of the Chiefs franchise is the team embracing the Native American side of their nickname, with the Chiefs. I don't know how to describe the relationship between the tomahawk chop, which started then under Marty in the early years of Marty Schottenheimer and Carl Peterson, but it really took off then. And I think it was think about where we were at the time and the teams that were successful elsewhere. The Atlanta Braves were going through their two World Series runs in 91 and 92, and the chop became that was a big thing for the Atlanta Braves fans, and they'd gotten it from Florida State, the Seminoles, and that had been a big part of what Florida State had done. And Florida State's has the blessing of the Seminole tribe for their imagery. So, but anyway, the Chiefs do it, and Vahe, you and I found on YouTube when we were at the Super Bowl at the last couple of months ago. The YouTube, anybody can go find it, and we'll actually play the audio for you here during the podcast of the Price Chopper commercial, Chiefs and Chopper, Chiefs and Chopper, Chiefs and Chopper. And then at the end, there's a big Frank Bowl picture. It was on Channel 4.
That's right.
He had nothing to do with the Chiefs and Chopper, but it was Channel. Apparently, the commercial ran on then Channel 4. So you get you've got that, and there is war paint that was always been part of the Chiefs, and then it's continued to be a part of the Chiefs. There was the infamous poster of Chiefs players dressed in Indian gear. Gear is not gear, but in headdresses and period stuff. So anyway, the Chiefs fully embraced at the time, and I didn't hear much pushback then. And Sam, you were a young fan, Chiefs fan at this time. I do remember going over to Haskell University in 1995 and talking to the athletic director and some of the student athletes there about how they felt about all this imagery. And they were down on, I can remember this, they were down on the Cleveland Indians Chief Wahoo logo. They were down on the tomahawk chop, but they didn't mind so much the Chiefs, the nickname of the Chiefs. And I really don't know how much has changed from then till now, but what has changed is we're in a pause in sports, right? Where we are, there's no sports going on. There's a lot more sensitivity to names, team nicknames, the Washington Redskins, the Cleveland Indians especially, and the Chiefs are getting caught up in that a little bit. So what do the Chiefs need to address? Where do they need to go with this?
Well, I think the 30,000 foot view is they need to be on the right side of, appropriation versus honoring. Like, that's the 30,000. I mean, I think we'd agree on that. I think we'd also agree that's easier said than done, right? Like, and that can be a blurry line sometimes. I've thought that the Washington Redskins, that name stands on its own. Like, that's in a different tier. That is a dictionary-defined racial slur. It seems crazy to me that that's lasted this long. I think in the next tier, the Cleveland Indians. Now, I think it was 2 years ago, they stopped using the Chief Wahoo logo, and they're going to have they're having some serious internal discussions about what they do there. But then I think the Chiefs, the Braves, the Seminoles, the Chicago Blackhawks, I don't know enough about that to say with any certainty, but Utah Utes, I mean, there's a bunch of teams and schools that are kind of in the same bucket, and they all need to have similar conversations about how they manage this, and it needs to be with Native American groups, and understanding that Native Americans aren't different than anybody else, in the sense that if you have 20 of them, they'll have 20 different opinions. So it's not, you can't just find one person or one group to say, no, that's okay. By the way, give us $50,000, because that stuff happens. This is America. It needs to be an honest discussion and an honest effort, to me. And I don't know exactly where that lands. My sense is that it would be without the chop. But I also think that the Chiefs, and I assume the Braves and other teams in this group, have done similar things. Like, the Chiefs have made outreaches. They've made partnerships with the Wardroom, with the Blessings, with some of these things. Is that enough? Do they need to do more? I think that's what these discussions need to figure out.
Well, you really identified the major point, which is what is consensus in this case, and what needs to be built, what needs to become something you can look at as a compelling, prevailing view. That's the right way to see it. I mean, I think that's, as you noted. I mean, even the percentage of Native Americans. I think in our editorial today, that the point is made that 65% of those polled in a I think a particularly credible poll are offended by the imagery, and so that seems like an ample amount to respect the wishes of. I don't know if you need 100%. So I mean, it's just all these things together are really hard to put in a blender and just say, okay, here's the answer. Here's how the approach should be. But I think if we've learned nothing, anything during this time, I should say, while we're engulfed in the protests and awakening of racial justice, it's we better be listening to the right people, and people with sensitivity to the point, people that are educated on the point, people whose very lives are actually affected by how people treat these things.
Yeah, kind of what I hear you saying, and it's a point I think that's worth emphasizing, is that, I can sit here and be a middle-aged white guy and have an opinion about whether the Chiefs is offensive or whether the chop is offensive or whatever, but that doesn't matter. What matters, my opinion on that doesn't matter. What matters is the people whose culture is involved. And I think with this and so many other issues that are going on in our country, not to get on a huge tangent, but we just need empathy. And I think we just need to be able to stop and try and see something from somebody else's point of view and try to understand. And I think that that's important in 1,000 different cases that we could talk about that would go beyond sports, but I think it's especially important right now with this.
Yeah, and you made me think of this. We've probably told this story to each other a few times, but this really resonated with me a few years ago, and I always thought the chop was, more silly than nasty, but it just puzzled me. And then you'd hear things like, as Blair notes, the Seminole tribe giving the blessing to it at Florida State, but being in Houston one year when there were some Native Americans were protesting, and I think the sign I remember that was the one that stuck out was something like, "Stop appropriating our culture." And I'm walking behind a Chiefs fan and his young son, maybe the child was maybe 10 years old, and the guy was yelling across the street at these people and doing a tomahawk chop at them. And I just remember that as a very clarifying moment for me. Like, maybe some people see this in a certain spirit, but others are quite quick to think of it that way, and becomes, this sounds a little harsh, but weaponized almost when you look at it that way. I don't know. That just has always stuck with me. And again, though, the blender, to use a silly term, but how do you process the Seminole tribe on this, Blair?
I don't know. That's a good question. Colleges have been out in front of this much more so than the pros. And even though there continues to be the Florida State Seminoles and the Utah Utes, other schools certainly have changed their nicknames to change the imagery. There used to be the Stanford Indians. It used to be the Marquette Warriors. Used to be the St. John's Redmen, right? Syracuse, once upon a time, had a mascot with it was an Indian with an exaggerated long nose, a cartoon Indian for the Syracuse. So I believe this is right, but I think North Dakota, the Fighting Sioux, has changed their,
I think they did. It did.
Perennial hockey power, and I remember how difficult it was for them to make that change, but they ultimately made the change. And the NCAA got behind a lot of this, saying that we'll withhold NCAA championships from your school if you don't change the nickname a few years ago. But the only instance in professional sports that I can think of, I'm sure I'm wrong about this, I'm sure there are more, but the only one I can think of, team nickname that was changed for reasons of sensitivity, was the Washington Bullets. Remember, the Bullets changed because of the murder rate in the nation's capital, and that's why they're the Wizards today. So,
by the way, North Dakota Fighting Hawks.
Is that what they are? Very good. Thanks. Hey, let's take a break, and when we come back, we got a few more questions to ask on this topic.
Chiefs and Chopper, Chiefs and Chopper, Chiefs and Chopper, Chiefs and Chopper. Chiefs and Chopper, Chiefs and Chopper.
Hey, it's Blair. We have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns presented on the kansascity.com site, and it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. Your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star, and that support has never been more important. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. Back with Vahe Gregorian and Sam Mellinger, and we're talking about nicknames in professional sports, Native American nicknames. So the Chiefs are having conversations about this, right? They just are. We know that those conversations are absolutely happening in Washington and in Cleveland. Really interesting that the Redskins are seriously considering the name change because the namesake of the stadium, FedEx, has asked them to change the nickname, and so have major sponsors like Nike and Pepsi.
Yeah, not just sponsor the stadium, but I forgot, is it Fred Smith, the CEO, owns a significant chunk of the Redskins as well.
Mm-hmm. He wants it done.
Yeah, this is very much coming from the inside.
And in Cleveland, the manager, Terry Francona, went on record, I think earlier this week, saying it's time to seriously consider changing the name of the Indians.
I hadn't seen that.
Yeah.
And Ron Rivera in Washington too, right?
Yeah.
So it's
coach. Suddenly
you're making me think of this, though. It sure would be interesting to talk to John Sherman about all this, as the new Royals owner who was whatever percentage that was in Cleveland, he was pretty embedded there.
Would be nice.
That's all.
Yeah. So we got to think that the Chiefs are having conversations about this. So what conversations are they having? What are they talking about in the halls of the Chiefs practice facility where the offices are? You know, where Mark Donovan, the VP of Business, certainly at the top of the list of folks having conversations. What are they talking about, and what could the Chiefs do to transition to something that's different? Well, this is a really interesting question because in many levels. But the first thing I think of is, all right, if you're running an organization like that, you got to be having internal conversations with yourself to sort of clarify what you're shooting to do. But again, back to that point about listening, I really wonder. I hope their conversations are about who should we be talking to and listening to more and trying to understand better as we consider what we might do to reconcile this. Because I don't think those people sitting in that room really ought to do it unilaterally. I think they really need to make sure that they make it clear that this is with input, help, partnership even with various groups that would have valid input. Well, we know that's been happening just because conversations we've had with Native Americans, the Chiefs have reached out to them, and they take maybe as much as any team in the NFL takes seriously, Sam, what you mentioned earlier, the Native American Month game. It's always in November, and they have tribes come in to not only bless the field, but to actually have people sing the national anthem and chant. And it's not taken lightly. They pass out literature, I know, to the media before the game, and we always take a look at it and write a little bit about it. I think that every NFL team does it. I just think maybe where Kansas City's located, and it was like every place else in America, settled by Native Americans, but has a Native American influence. Especially a lot of people from Oklahoma come up to help celebrate that Native America Day. That the Chiefs do have conversations and listen to members of different tribes about this.
Yeah, again, it's just most of this is not most, but this is an issue right now in large part because of what the Redskins are doing, and then it's like this sort of like trickle down to. That's the wrong way to put it, but there's a chain, and the Chiefs are involved in that chain. But again, like it's just such a different deal. Again, a dictionary defines racial slur to the Chiefs. There's a gap in there, and I keep using this term because it makes sense, at least in my brain. But the Chiefs have done a lot of homework on this issue with those partnerships and with sort of rethinking how they do some things. But if you're asking like what those conversations are like, it's Mark's show. I think it's Mark Donovan's show. I mean, nothing's going to happen without Clark Hunt signing off. But this is Mark, and I'm sure he'll talk to in-house counsel and stuff like that. But this is Mark Donovan's show, and it's hard for me to imagine that they're not having those discussions now, and also that they didn't just pick up the phone and have these discussions. There's some ongoing relationships now. I think one thing. There's a distinction to me between having conversations with people you're already partnered with, i.e. paying, and then I hope that they're having conversations with more quote unquote independent viewpoints of people that aren't going to feel directly or indirectly pressured to be like, no, you're doing the right thing. I mean, I hope it's like an honest discussion. I would be very surprised if those discussions involve any serious talk of changing the name. I don't think that – I know that that's something the Chiefs are going to resist. And I also don't know that we're at that point, and maybe that's some insensitivity. And I'm going to have my own discussions, the same thing that I'm trying to tell the Chiefs to do. I'm going to have some of those, I think, this afternoon, actually, to get more informed on this. But I hope that that's a general view. It's not just the people you already have the partnerships with, but it's a broader view of like come on, tell us. We want to do the right thing. We don't want to be out. We don't want to be the Redskins in 20 years where like let's get this while we can and figure out. I think those are the discussions. I hope those are the discussions.
Blair, just a little subset of the question to throw back at you, because I know you've been on the front lines of this very specific point. I seem to recall that there had been discussion about, for instance, headdresses were no longer going to be allowed at Arrowhead. What I don't remember is whether that ever actually got executed. I feel like postseason last year, we would have seen that. It's a fraction of an example in a way about everything, but I just wonder if you recall where that went and what the dynamics of that were, if that played out the way that various parties had hoped it would.
Well, the first thing I remember was the Chiefs asking network partners not to show people in headdresses on TV. But there were sometimes it couldn't be helped. If you're sitting in the front row or in the end zone or something, and someone scores a touchdown, you get that angle, you're going to see a guy somebody in a headdress. So this is something I guess I would have to ask Mark, but I don't remember the Chiefs saying, "Don't bring the headdress into the stadium." I just know that they asked for it not to be seen, and certainly not on their jumbotron, on their big screen in the side of the stadium. I wonder if there's not a First Amendment right here. Freedom of speech, freedom of expression. What's to prevent somebody from looking like that? I don't know what legally if you can prevent somebody from painting themselves up as an Indian or.
I wonder if you could inside the stadium. I wonder if those rules are different.
It would seem to me it would be,
but I'm just wondering. There was an instance. This has probably been 5-6 years ago. The San Francisco Giants had a Native American heritage night or whatever at the ballpark, and there was a fight that broke out between some, I believe, white fans in headdresses, all that stuff, and some Native Americans that were there. And in the wake of that, the Giants talked about banning that kind of thing in the future. Now, I don't know how many people go to a San Francisco Giants game in a headdress. Like, I don't think that's a common
not an
occurrence.
Issue for the Giants.
But they at least talked about it. San Francisco is a different place, but they at least talked about that. I wonder if there's a way to do that.
It's a really broad question. I mean, because without being a First Amendment expert, I mean, it strikes me that you have, as a team, as a stadium entity, that you have the right to have a, whatever you want to call it, code of conduct, that this is acceptable in the stadium, this is not. On the other hand, how do you legislate some of that? And the other thing, on the third hand, Blair and I got talking about this kind of casually yesterday, Sam, but this is true. It's somewhere in here also there has to be some thought to how you're going to convey this message of whatever it is you're going to say we don't accept. How heavy-handed should that be to be effective? Are you going to say this, you can't do this, or are you going to say, we ask that you not? I mean, just things like that. What's going to be more effective? What's going to really get to the solution you seek? And Blair, I'm kind of commandeering one of the points you were making to me, but I wonder if you want to amplify that.
Well, you're right. We did have that conversation recently, and I guess what I wonder is would or should the Chiefs discourage the chop by not playing the music? The music starts and the fans chop, right? And the Chiefs can control that.
Yeah.
They absolutely can control that. Now, that's not going to stop fans from doing the chop on their own.
For sure.
But that would strike me as a way to...
a simple...
Yes, a simple gesture.
Way.
Just don't play the music. And then if there's fans deciding to chop and it's a stadium thing, you can put a message on the Jumbotron saying, just like that, we ask the fans to respect Native Americans and just some sort of message. That's not... We're not banning anything. We're just suggesting this.
There'll be a school. That. Go ahead, sorry, Sam.
They tried that. They stopped playing it, and fans basically flipped out. I can't remember when this was. I don't even remember if it was in 1995 or in 2005. But they did that at one point, and fans just expressed their opinions strongly that they wanted it back, and so the Chiefs started playing it again.
Well, that also gets at another question too. Like, okay, so there's this notion of doing it this way, but do they have an obligation to condemn as opposed to gently lead? And just stick with their conviction. I mean, I don't know the answer to that. I keep thinking about what's most effective. It is interesting, that idea of the revolt, and you're making me think of this. So if we do indeed play football this year, and we got whatever that plan the Chiefs announced today, I didn't get to digest, but there's going to be 20,000 people in the stadium. Does that favor the one of these approaches more or less? I mean, it seemingly would be diluted a little with fewer people in the stadium. On the other hand, the fewer the people, the more of a statement any one person can make. So I don't know.
It's Sam, you mentioned that the Chiefs tried this before, but I just think the tenor of the times has changed.
For sure.
And this is the time to have the conversation, to ask the questions about this, especially with what's going on with the Redskins and the Indians and others. So, okay, well, let's. I don't know if anybody talked themselves into a different answer. But are we still good with what we said at the beginning? Keep the name.
Yeah, I am, but I do think your bigger point is a great point, that we ought to understand it. This isn't really the time to lock in and say, well, this is what I think, and I'm sticking right here no matter what. I think exactly right. It's a really good time. I've learned that maybe more than ever the last couple of months. I mean, whatever I thought I felt I understood about certain aspects of racial injustice, I feel like I've just heard it differently. I just process this differently, and I hope everybody's having some experience like that right now. My feeling is people are, and it seems like it applies to this.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some people, and this is true of any issue, right? But there's people whose instinct is just to dig in further and not move their feet on anything. But I do think that there's a bigger appetite in a lot of places in the country to have these discussions. And again, like I think that the Chiefs probably do need to adjust some things. I don't know if that's to make things like the blessing and these things just more visible and a more sort of tangible or again visible part of the pregame experience for fans. I don't know if it's just as simple as like stop playing the music for the chop. I don't know, but I just hope, and I do believe that the Chiefs are going to have these conversations and not just with Native American groups that they have pre-existing partnerships with that include money. I can't emphasize that enough. But some other, just sort of, again, independent groups. Just honest conversations. Nobody's like accusing the Chiefs of being the Redskins. Like that doesn't exist. So let's get that out. But, it's also different than if they were the Kansas City Kings or whatever. I mean, it just is. So I just hope that there's some honest conversations and trying to see things from the other side.
In my, my way of thinking, when I think of the word Chiefs, first you think of, because we live here, we think of the football team and their fans are, they've matured. Their fan base is going to be pretty strong for the next dozen years or so with the action earlier this week. But is there a way to transition the word chief and separate it from Native Americans and into other forms of the definition? Police chief, fire chief, chief of staff, editor-in-chief. Unlike the Redskins, it can only be used in one way. Chief can be used in many ways.
So
it's a French word. It's originally a French word, chief.
So boss, basically.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
God, how can this guy's name be eluding me? Like the mob guy, the famous Kansas City machine, Pendergast machine.
Yes, right. Well, that alludes back to the editorial where the writer says, "I don't think you want a chubby old politician as your logo." So.
I can't believe I couldn't bring in the name, but
that doesn't play.
It doesn't. All right, we'll leave it here. Sam, Vahe, thanks for the great conversation, and we'll talk to you guys again soon.
All right,
That'll do it for today. Thanks to our production staff of Derek Donovan, Savannah Smith, Randy Mason, Beth Welch, Jeff Rosen, and Chris Fickett. A tip of the cap to Vahe, Gregorian, and Sam Mellinger for talking Chiefs and nicknames. Hey, earlier in the episode, you heard me talk about the Sports Pass offer. It still stands and still a good one. $30 for a year's worth of sports coverage, and that includes Sports Extra with the e-edition. There's 33 additional pages of national sports coverage today. Well, here's an even better offer. Buy the entire Kansas City Star product. Sports news features, commentary, analysis, the whole thing. You get all the stories written by my talented colleagues, plus extra news, sports, and business coverage. The details can be found at account.kansascity.com/subscribe. That's account.kansascity.com/subscribe. And whether it's the Sports Pass or the full subscription, you're getting and supporting the best sports and news coverage in Kansas City and helping us produce programs like SportsBeat KC. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back on Thursday with another episode.